Welcome everyone to DRJ's webinar series. I'm Bob Arnold, President here at Disaster Recovery Journal. We would like to thank you for your attendance today and hope you gather some great information from today's webinar. Everyone's phone has been muted and we ask you to utilize the question panel you'll find on the right-hand side of your screen. Our speaker today will attempt to answer as many of these as possible at the end of the presentation. Today's sponsor is Strategic BCP. Today's topic is Escape the BC Plan Quagmire. Tips and tricks for migrating seamlessly to a better solution. Our speaker today is Frank Perlmutter. Frank is a former manager of DR and COOP for the U.S. Department of Treasury. He is currently the president and co-founder of Strategic BCP, creators of Resilience One. He has also directed business continuity planning and strategic projects for 75 plus clients at the C-level, in addition to over 20 for federal government projects, and over spanning the course of about 17 years or so. With no further introduction, I'd like to welcome and turn the mic over to Frank.
Okay, thanks a lot, Bob. Okay, so it's definitely a pleasure to be here today. We're going to go over quite a few different things today about migration. So some of the webinar goals today you'll see are up here on the bullets. We're going to talk about the psychology of switching to a new solution, and as we were putting this together, you could almost see this could almost be done for anything. You know, moving to a new house, switching to a new cell phone or cell phone provider, which will actually use that analogy today. Almost anything. So what's the psychology of actually making the decision to switch? So we're going to go over that today and how to provide justification to both yourself and also to management for making that switch to a software product. And then the second half of the presentation is going to be about putting together the migration plan and actually executing it. So it's almost like two halves of this webinar of looking at the justifications, how to overcome the fears, and then actually doing the migration. This also applies too to if you're currently utilizing a manual process or templates too. So it's not just switching from one software to another software, it's also about switching from templates too. Okay, so it's a hot industry topic right now, and why is it so, why is it so pertinent to us today? Notice here I write in migration, switching, conversion. It's called a lot of different things, moving, all different synonyms here for what's going on. So why exactly is this happening? Why is there a desire to migrate to a better solution? A lot of times what we've seen, and this is a lot of this stuff is very familiar, current software, your templates, the user experience, it's poor, it's cumbersome. People have a desire to switch because honestly their customers and users aren't very happy right now. Another thing that's happening right now is too, and over the course of, I would say, is for as long as I can remember, and we continue to see this, is that a lot of upgrades within current tools wind up being extremely costly and time-consuming. So, you know, every time there's some sort of an upgrade, you have to move your data, you have to move, you have to change around, potentially change around screens, learn new things. So even the current process is almost like doing a migration anyway. So wouldn't it be better to just be into a better process? So a lot of people are on that line of thought. With some new products coming out from current vendors, there's an unclear migration path. So there's, I think there's quite a bit of uncertainty in going into that new product. So people are looking for other alternatives. Some people have had within their current software an inability to upgrade to a new version. So even within current software, it's difficult to upgrade within that software. Overall, poor vendor customer service we've heard about obviously out in the market, and then also too the capability of the current templates or of the current software, it just can't deliver what the organization is doing right now. They've moved past it. we frequently see this. I mean, there's tons of articles, obviously, about templates. Very difficult to coordinate across an organization when you're utilizing standalone documents within different business areas and in IT and in crisis management. It's hard to coordinate everything together, to comply with current standards out there, to report, and most importantly, to be resilient. So these are some of the reasons that people are looking to migrate, and maybe some of these are familiar to you. And we're actually going to ask you for some of your feedback on why you're looking. Some people have already decided they want to migrate. We're going to ask you for your feedback a little bit later on why you're looking to do that. Okay, so now we're going to get into the psychology part of actually migrating. Biggest thing, as we all know, it's difficult to overcome something that people are familiar with, even with something that's obviously more efficient on here. And what you'll notice on here, this is not a real newspaper article on here. People have asked me this, they're like, oh, where'd you cut this out of? I didn't cut it out of anywhere. There's actually a neat site where you can put this together. And back at my time at the Department of the Treasury, we actually had an initiative where we were trying to move people on Social Security from getting paper checks over to getting direct deposit. All right. And I'm going to read you this little fake article on here just to show you how absurd that fear can be of moving. So I'll read this to you. People all over the United States protested the adoption of direct deposit. Buildings were burned, cars overturned as a general panic ensued from the switch from Social Security payments from checks to direct deposit. Said one gentleman who preferred not to be identified, how dare they take away my paper check? This direct deposit is some kind of strange magic. They'll never be able to track it down, meaning his payment, when they lose it. Officials commented on the situation, of course, from an undisclosed location, asking for peace and civility, emphasizing the benefits and hundreds of millions of cost savings to the American people. The benefit was obvious, but there were a lot of people who were used to getting their check, taking it to the bank, depositing it. When you look at it, it's tough to make people to switch. They're going to be reluctant to change. They're going to give excuses. It's going to be a battle. The biggest thing is, how do you justify that? How do you feel comfortable, first off, in switching, and how do you make other people comfortable too? I'm going to show you a little video right now, and hopefully the sound is okay on this. It's a very brief commercial that Samsung released about switching. So I'm just going to put this up on my screen here very quickly, and I'm going to play this, and this is another example of the fear of switching.
The more I see the GS4, the more I want one.
Then you should get one.
That's so locked in.
I mean, they have Smart Switch that transfers everything over for you.
I don't know if I feel like learning how to use another phone.
You had to learn how to use your phone at one point, didn't you?
Yeah.
And you don't think you can do that again?
I see what you did there.
Okay, so you can see, and I'm not a spokesman for Samsung, but you can see on there what's going on, where she's saying that really, she's making excuses, and really none of those are really justifiable. It's a gut feel. I don't want to learn. I don't want to do this. But the benefits are clear to her. She wants to do it. I feel locked in. General, subjective types of feelings. So let's discuss and let's dig a little bit more into this fear of switching. So a lot of the excuses that come out, so here's the excuses of actually switching to an automated solution from templates or from another software. So if we were making a commercial, this is what we would see on here. Excuse number one, I have 4 of them on here. It's going to take months of my people's time. If I do nothing, I won't have a problem. If I stay inactive, I won't have a problem. So here's the thing. The reality is really, if you have a good migration plan, which you're going to go over, it's not going to take you months. If you have a vendor migrate the data for you, and we'll also talk about the cost of doing this too, obviously a consideration, you can establish a firm time frame that won't take much. You can say, I need it migrated in this amount of time. This is the longest I can wait, and you can establish that time frame with a vendor. Here's another reality. A lot of current software upgrades are going to require months of time anyway. So you're kind of looking, when you do a comparison in between your current situation and migrating to a new solution, it's the same or even better anyway if you can do the migration quicker, and a lot of times that can happen. And then if you have a new product from your existing vendor that you have to go to, you're going to have to do it anyway. So wouldn't it be better if you're actually looking right now? And maybe that's the right solution for you. Maybe it's not. But you need to get the answers first off to determine what exactly you're going to do. Are you going to go to a new product? Are you going to stay in your existing product? Or are you going to go to that, if you have to go to that new product eventually, how long is that going to take? Get that from your vendor. Okay, number 2, it's going to be really costly. It's going to cost me a lot of money. So here's the thing. The reality is some vendors, yes, they're going to charge you quite a bit of money to assist you or to do that migration for you. Others aren't going to do that. Don't make assumptions. Get an actual cost proposal from them. Second reality on there, your upgrades, they're going to cost you a lot of money too. So once again, look at your current situation and do a comparison on there. Think objectively about it. And the same thing with migrating to a new product. Obviously, it's going to cost you, and it's going to be time and money. Do a comparison once again. New tool training. All right, so just like the excuse within the phone commercial, now everybody has to learn a new system. The reality is a lot of people, one of the biggest reasons for switching is my people hate using this system. As a business continuity professional, makes your life not very good. Your customers don't like what you're providing them. So they may be amenable to a change. So I would balance utilizing a tool that they don't like versus looking at something where they may be amenable to. All product switches require training. So the question is, everybody's going to have to learn something new. But how much training is required? Is it a lot? Is the new system intuitive or easy to use? And that's really important to understand. Because if you're just going into the same problem that you had before, then that's definitely not going to solve your problem. It's just going to be like, oh, great, now we have another system that we don't like. So you definitely want to make an evaluation. We're going to show you how to do that too. Loss of my current data. Most of my data will be lost if I switch to another tool. Now, the reality of the situation is that most data can be migrated to a new tool, and many times you can take that data from documents, and this is really one of the most valuable reasons for switching, is that when you have data within documents and it's siloed in there and it's difficult to analyze in those documents, what a vendor can do for you or what a new tool can do for you is if they can take that data and put it into the database where you can analyze it and it relates to one another through dependencies, you wind up getting so much more out of that data, better reporting, and an ability to comply a lot easier and to really show and to coordinate and do your plans at really any organizational level, where it makes it really difficult when data is locked in documents on there. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. Okay, so now that we know some of the reasons, the psychology around it, let's look at how we're going to assemble a justification for moving on here. Well, obviously, there's a couple of different things that you want to do on here. The first thing that you want to do is you want to obviously, and I'm sure there are entire we've seen them entire webinars, entire articles about a functional comparison between new software and your old software. How are you buying your software in there? I give you a very basic method in looking at it, and it's effective for a lot of people. We'll actually go over that. Not going to get into that in too much depth, but just give you a nice example on there. How do you assemble? What are the different benefits that you want to look at? And also, how do you get all of the different migration costs on there of the costs of moving? So as I mentioned earlier, many people have already made the decision to switch. Obviously, a lot of people are attending this webinar because you're like, all right, well, show me how to do it. I do apologize if this is redundant information for you, but I think it could definitely help out some of the other folks on the webinar to find out why are you switching. So in your questions panel, I don't know if that's available now or the comments panel, post why in there that you've decided to move, and I'll read off some of those. I will not read your name or your organization or anything like that. I will just read off some of the comments at some of the whys at the end of the webinar. And one of the biggest challenges on here too, and here's a little analogy for you, if anybody's ever built a house, you know you're not going to be able to see the house until it's built. You're not going to be able to live in the house until it's built. And just like with a house, a software, you're not going to know the end state until you've been playing around in it for a while. So you want to make an objective decision by sticking to your analysis. You want to have enough information without trying to gather too much. It would be really nice if you could actually go in, you get all your data imported, you could play in it for a while and you start doing stuff. That's not typically reasonable to do. So we're going to show you how to make a reasonable decision on there where it won't take you forever to make the decision, and also, too, it'll help you balance your people's times, too, to make something that's resolute and justifiable within your organization. Okay, so as we talked, as I mentioned before, the first thing we start with is a very simple functionality comparison. Software really focuses around a couple of core areas. How you put data in the system, what are the screens on there, so we call that data input user experience on there. You want to look on there. How is the software intuitive? Is it better than what you have on there? Is it easier for your users and also for your administrators on there? So the data input user experience. Program management. So this is sort of like the overarching ability of the software. Does it coordinate all of my program better? Does it improve the process? Does it help coordinate all of the different planning elements together? And with the different compliance requirements out there, and there are many, does it help me comply with that better, really to show the auditors and also all of the different, with conformance to those regulations, does it help me conform or comply with those better? Within the system, so when you have the data in the system, the middle part is the data analysis and the reporting. So when the data is in there, what does it do with the data? And this is a huge reason, probably more than anything, of why people switch. We need that better data analysis and reporting. Templates, a lot of times, no matter how hard we try, and I did it for a number of years before using software, was that trying to analyze and report what I could do in a click in software could take weeks or months to do in spreadsheets and even other commercial systems too. So you want to look in there. Is it easier to generate the report data I require? Does it provide added value? So in other words, the reports that are coming out, can I get them out in the first place, and does it provide added value to the executives making decisions? Custom reporting on the fly is critical in there, so a lot of people are looking for that. And obviously, how do you get it out? How do you get your plans out of the system or data out? Is it easier to get your plans to your users, and does the plan output look better? So a lot of folks, one of the old ways software restricts users from getting plans is with user licenses. So I have 5 user licenses, and I got to get out plans to 100 people. Well, those 5 people are going to have a very intensive process of getting that out. So very manual, even though you have that software in there. Same with your templates on there. So does the system help you do that, where people can go in and get their own plans? And sometimes, does plan output look better? That's less of a consideration right now. One of the big things is that we see in the market right now is obviously many people, you have to generate a plan, but it's so much more than that within the job. So this is important, but really people are focusing on these 3 items up here. What I've done is I just wrote up a little basic chart on here. And we'll be distributing this a little later on, the presentation too, if you'd like a copy of it. Just very basic. You can see on here, broke it down into 4 areas. We have a weighting on here. So you can see here, maybe one is a little bit more important than the other on here. We put in a little summary of what we think of of what we're currently doing. We score that, and then what are we doing in the new tool, or you might have maybe the spreadsheet goes out a little further, where you're assessing multiple different tools on here. And what I've done is, I didn't show my math here, but what I've done is I've taken the weighting times the score. So 5 times 2 is 10, 3 times 3 is 9, added them all together down here. So that's what we've done on both of these. Okay, so now we looked at the functional area. Now let's get into the actual benefits of moving. And this is the benefit is going to be a little bit redundant on here, but I want to go over some additional points on here too. When you're assembling, some people want to assemble a packet both of themselves, as I mentioned before, and also for the people that would also fund this, the people that are sponsoring the program. We put together a benefit statement. We also put together the cost data, as we mentioned earlier. So as part of that benefit statement, you're probably going to have your functional scorecard in here. A lot of people, what we've seen on here is they will actually do a comparison in between core tasks within business continuity planning. I mentioned that distribution of having 5 users distribute plans as opposed to anybody being able to get into the system. Nice way to do that comparison. How much is it costing me right now internally with my manual method or an inefficient software method versus a better one? Some other things too are business impact analysis. It's huge because when you're doing a method that requires you to actually build things from scratch, your surveys, and then you have to do the reporting around those surveys and the analysis and everything, that can take hours and hours and hours in time if you use consulting and dollars and things like that. So it's really important to look at those things. And reporting is also an ongoing expense too. A lot of people, if you don't have custom reports, oh, it's going to cost me this amount of money to do reports. See that, because that could be a big hidden expense of some tools, either the one you're currently using or even some of the new tools too. The other benefit statements: improved ability to recover, reduction of losses from outages on there. I actually, when you're looking within the software, you could actually reduce that amount of time. If it takes me this amount of time to use my paper plans and my templates, and that process is being automated, I can more quickly recover. If I'm putting out my plans in a coordinated fashion, where people can go all into one centralized location, a software tool, if it has that capability, then that's going to provide improved ability to recover. The hours saved on there and the dollars of saved impact are critical. That's another thing that people put in the statement. Required delivery of data for compliance, for competitive contracts. People are really getting, as we've known for a long time, we always focus on the resilience part of the thing, the reduction of losses, but also, too, a better recovery plan is a competitive advantage. And a lot of people say, well, that's kind of, we don't see that a lot. We actually do. It's very interesting. Business recovery plans over core functions, if you have a capability to recover a core function, if you're a vendor for somebody, say you're collecting payments for them, you're a collections company, and you're going on out, and I can do that quicker, and I can post that quicker if I have an outage on there and somebody else doesn't have that capability. That's a really big defining factor, and we've seen that in multiple different contracts. A lot within the financial services industry especially, but really if you're a vendor supporting somebody else's operations, very important to emphasize those kind of things. And your tool, the reporting, needs to be able to generate those types of reports to show that. And then the other thing that we also see too is ongoing sustainability of a company-supported tool versus something that somebody created. When you're throwing a bunch of templates at people, if that person leaves, you better hope that they're training the new person that has that. Things tend to get lost. When you have the support of a company, you can really go on in, and they have their, we have set training programs, and there's also, you have whole communities of people that understand the product as opposed to just being that single point of failure, for lack of a better term. Okay, and the cost data. So the biggest thing, you'll notice on here what I did was I bolded this written and signed cost proposal from your vendor. Written and signed. Not, I think so, but written and signed. So the big things that you want from your vendor is you want to know what this is going to cost. You don't want a surprise saying, oh, it's a couple $100,000 to do this. You need to know what it's going to be. Now, a lot of times, the very first thing that you have to do, and we're going to go over this later, is that your vendor needs to look at the data before they tell you how big this is, and then they can give you that proposal. So there's a certain amount of work that needs to be done by the vendor to analyze and classify how that data is going to wind up in their system before they can give that to you. So just know that. We're going to come back to this. This is very detailed in here. The migration costs, so how much is it going to cost you after they've done this? this analysis. How long is it going to take? What are milestones along the way? How are people going to be able to validate from your organization that the data is right in there? What are the resource expectations? So in other words, is it going to require a lot of your time? You really want to know that. Or is it all on the vendor? Or is it a balance? A lot of times it will be a balance, but are we looking at 80 for you and 20 for the vendor, or is it the other way around? How much is the new tool going to cost? How much is the new tool going to cost to configure and the consulting cost? Big, 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 big. This is one of the hidden costs of software. So I can go out and I can say, hey, it's going to be $10,000 a year for the license, and then the setup, how long is it going to take me, or take the vendor or you, to set up that software? What are they going to charge you to do that? So you may be looking at a substantial charge, and this happens all the time. So really make sure that that's contained on there. Are there any report development or custom work costs like we talked before, both initially and on an ongoing basis? Are you going to charge me for new tool training, and how long is that going to take? And then on an ongoing basis, how long is it going to take, and what's the cost for doing my upgrades? As I mentioned before, you don't want to wind up in another bad situation if that's a current problem. Get all of these things within that written and signed cost proposal. Okay. So that's an overview of what you're doing within your benefit, what are the benefits, what are the different costs in doing things. So now we're moving on to the second half of the webinar, developing your migration plan. So what are the different things that we're going to do to make this happen? So as I mentioned before, you have to do a couple of things before you get that cost proposal, so keep an eye out for that in the slides, and I'll definitely bring that up. So a couple of things first, some definitions for you before we get started. BCP automation, improving from a labor-intensive process, doesn't matter, as I mentioned before, whether it's from spreadsheets or from or documents, or from another commercial tool to a different one, to a streamlined automated process, moving from something which isn't as good to something that's better. When I speak of native format, that's going to be the original format of your data of a file. So if you have something that's stored in the database, that would be relational data, would be the native format. If you're storing it within, say, a Microsoft Word format, that's your native format if it's originally stored in there. So that's native format, original format is how we'll use that term. Data parsing. What that means is that when we have all of the data in front of us, how do we divide that up logically to get it into the new system on there? A data schematic is a chart or maybe a document that shows where the specific field elements reside in the software. So in other words, you know, where do my facilities reside? Where do my relationships for my supporting assets, my support components reside in the system? So in other words, like my IT, my people, my vendors that are supporting things. Where are those relationships stored, those interdependencies? What are the screens that those are stored in? So there's multiple data schematics for that. Usually you're looking at like the screens, the fields, the data, you know, the different, the back-end database, those different types of things. In other words, you need to know where it's going to go, and then you can map it to that particular schematic of the new system. Now, big difference on here. Big, big difference. Document migration and data migration, two completely different things. Now, when people say that they can migrate, okay, if you have a vendor out there that says, hey, I can migrate your stuff, make sure they just don't mean document migration. Moving something in its native format of a document, of a Word document, into their new system as a document, there's very little ROI on that. You're really not getting too much more. You're like, all right, well, now I have hopefully a better way to manage my documents. There's not a lot of return on that. You want to make sure that you're doing data migration, taking data that's locked in documents that can go into that relational format. Keep in mind, you want to make it where you're improving on your process, where you're becoming better, not where you're just trying to replicate what you're doing. And that's a really important point. If you're just doing the same thing as you did before, not a lot of return on investment on that. There's probably no reason to switch. It wouldn't be worth the trouble. So no, you want to improve the process, and we'll show you how to do that now. So what's the migration plan, the migration plan look like? So it's basically 5 different parts on there. coming up with what your end state is, so keeping in mind what you want to have by the time you're done in your new system. So in other words, the input, the analysis, the outputs, and the overall program management. And then we start doing getting the data together, delivering the data, doing the data analysis, classification, and parsing, then actually prepping for the migration, and then actually doing that. So that's what each of these slides is going to cover in the remainder of the presentation. Okay, so determining a desired end state. So as I just mentioned, you want to improve collectively. You want to get better with how you're inputting data into the system. So a lot of people may say, I still want to do it in, it's like, well, I want to do it in spreadsheets. Well, you're probably not going to get spreadsheets in an automated system on there, but you want something that's easy to use. So you need to overcome utilizing some of these old tools and realize that there are better ways to do data input and the customer experience, of being open to that. And as I mentioned before, the other different ways on there too. So the goal is not to duplicate, but to improve them. And like I said before, if everything looks and works the same, you really haven't improved everything on there. So you need to be flexible. The other thing, though, is, too, you need to make sure that you're getting what you need in the system. The biggest thing that a lot of people do, migrating or not, is over-customization. So they go on in, and I want to change screens, and I want to change fields, and I want to change just everything in there, how a tool is doing everything on there. You know what? Customization is to be expected, but there's a right amount of doing that. You definitely, there's going to be ways that systems are going to do things, okay? And the main thing is you want to get as close as possible. You want to match your requirements as closely to the out-of-the-box functionality. That's going to be the right tool for you with limited customization on there. So just keep in mind, the more you customize on there, the more you're doing this kind of thing. It really restricts a lot of things moving forward. One, upgrading. When you start doing those upgrades on there, there may be things that don't apply to you. So it's going to limit these global upgrades that these the suppliers are coming out with. And also, too, you may compromise some of the functionality of the system, and it can also be really expensive and time-consuming on there. So that's the thing. There is an amount of customization that you want to do. Just don't overdo it on there. But that's really up to you. You have to find a middle ground in there. We've just seen, I think, the reason why a lot of people are unhappy with their current solution is because they've done just that. They've gone on in and they maybe over-customized a little too much. And I think also, too, you also wind up where, once again, you have that single point of failure on there, too, where it's been customized so much, people can't really keep up with that. Okay, so how do we start doing this? Data assembly and delivery. So two things on here with data assembly and delivery. So the first thing you need to do is you need to see what you have on there. So you've got either templates or plans or business continuity software data. That's the first thing. So it may be in a tool, maybe in a database, maybe in documents. You also have data that may feed your current system or your documents. Typically, those are called systems of record. You might call it something else. So a lot of times people are pulling HR data for users. They may be going in to a CMDB that's storing your IT assets. So in other words, I'm pulling a list of all my applications or my databases or my servers from that CMDB and pulling that into my software. We've seen a lot of different sources of or systems of record on there. So you want to make sure that you're considering those too. How are you going to feed those on an ongoing basis? That's data that you want to get on over to the new system. And sometimes people actually store things outside of the system. So obviously, if you're using templates, you already have your documents, spreadsheets, diagrams, but some people even store some things outside. Some of the things they keep outside of the system. Typically, you don't see a lot of that, but don't forget those if you have those, just to at least look for this. So now that you have all of your data assembled from these different areas there, you need to see, is it usable? And this is a question a lot of people don't ask. This is really important. You don't want to dump a bunch of junk into your new system and then go, well, I'll just take it out later. that is a bad idea. You don't want it's like if you kept the trash in your house or your office forever, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to keep it around. It's going to start smelling bad real quickly, and you'll start to see that in your system too if you keep it around. So the thing is, when you're going through and you're looking at that data, don't put it in the data set to migrate if it's not usable. Take a look at those plans. Take a look at how old that BIA data is. And a lot of times what you can do is there's a difference between mimicking a process or improving a process, like how you would do a BIA, versus bringing over the data itself. Like, I like the way that I come up with an RTO, but the last time I did that was 5 years ago. Don't bring over the data. But obviously, you need to feel comfortable with how the BIA is done in the new tool, where it's close to what you have. So typically, you'll usually decide that during your functional assessment on there. But just keep that in mind on there. Don't bring over junk. It's going to make your system a mess from the start, to start fresh. Okay, so now that we have our data sets, we go now and we want to look at that software data schematic. And one of the big things is, you may have the vendor do this for you, or you may do it yourself. It all depends. And obviously, it comes down to time and cost of that being done. So that schematic on there is going to show you, here's where you can put all of your data in the system. Now you have all of your data sitting there. Where does it go? So it's sort of putting the things in the different buckets on there. You're going to map your data to the new software on there. The vendor will do that for you. So the first thing that you would do is you would say, okay, I want to know what database field does this go into, or what's the screen on there, okay? And the data that's moving over on in there, what you can do is you can look at the format of that. So in other words, if you can move the data over, say I have it in, I have a list of, say, of all my recovery plan steps in a Word document. Right now, that's a document. It's siloed. It's whether it's in SharePoint, SharePoint-based system, in a file shared, whatever it is, and you say, can I move that over into relational fields, into the database itself, not as a document, but as data into the new tool. That's relational on there. And it helps you with being able to report on that data, being able to analyze that data too. So when you're putting that in there, obviously you can see the benefit of putting the data in as relational. This is really the ideal format of the data residing in the new tool. Some things you won't be able to get over, no matter how much you try, or you may have something that's just not appropriate in a database field. For instance, some people may have a map of the recovery center in there. Obviously, there's no reason to put that in a relational field. That would be more of an attachment. So document-based things, they come on over. And how do we link those up to plans? You may have some things as extraneous. A lot of times what we see, I can only speak for our system, is that some systems will keep references, like data references and data tables, that aren't utilized within the new system. That's extraneous data, those things that get thrown away. Or you may find things that are, probably another word for this would be redundant data. You're duping it in different places on there because it's in a document or because it's just not efficient in your current system. So you can eliminate that data. So once again, it's not bad data to start, but it's more data that you can eliminate and just keep the good stuff in there. And then things that you just can't get in at all into the new system. We typically don't see a lot of this in there. Typically, you'll be able to get it in like this. Worst case scenario is document-based. So when you know what the format is, you know where it's going to go, now you need to see, how am I going to get that into the new tool? So there's a couple of different ways to do that, and I'm going to go over the easy ones first, the ones that are more familiar, and I'm going to talk about what an application programming interface is. A spreadsheet import. So a lot of times what we'll see is we'll see headers. So what's a header? It's on the top of a spreadsheet. It's the name of the field that it's going into within a specific table within the new software. So maybe on the old software it might say locations, and maybe on the new software it might say facilities, or it might be the same. What you would do is you would put it in that spreadsheet with that header on there, and there's usually, there's some sort of an import method where it'll actually map right into that those relational fields in the database. As far as documents are concerned, that may be a batch upload where it'll take them all at once, or you may have to manually enter that data. So manual data entry is exactly how it sounds. You have your old data and you're typing it into the new system on there. Or even better, the vendor does it. The vendor does it for you, where you don't have to do that. And then you also have your API. So what exactly is an API? An API is an automated way where tools from one system can feed another one. We typically see this within mass notification systems. So in other words, like within our system, what's going on is that it's feeding people's names into the notification system, and that third-party system is sending out messages to people. So what this would be is, say your HR system, you would have the people in there, and then it would automatically feed into the new system. So really what it's doing is there's no setting up of the data in any type of spreadsheets. There's no manual data entry. It's an automated feed into the new system. That's ideal too, and obviously on an ongoing basis, a lot of people will do it that way. So that's a really great way if you're going from templates into a tool to do things. And obviously make sure that it is an API. That is not a spreadsheet, completely different kind of thing. Okay, so a couple more notes on data analysis and classification. Obviously, the closer the data is to its end state format, the easier it is to bring in. Transferring documents from a relational database fields will take more time since the data needs to be parsed. So in other words, if you're taking documents and you have to manipulate that data and then you have to make it look pretty, called data cleansing on there, it's going to take a little bit more time to do that. So the closer you are to that native format, the better. A lot of people, it's very interesting, a lot of people are still using CSV files. Cleaning the data in a CSV file is a lot more difficult than cleaning up data in a spreadsheet file, I guess, unless you do this for a living. I've done both of those, and I can tell you there's specialized tools for doing the data within the CSV files, but a lot of times there's something called a delimiter. It separates the fields in long lines on there by a comma or a tab. And I'll tell you, doing it in a spreadsheet, there's a lot more functionality from Excel or any other spreadsheet program that you're using than that CSV file. So if you can get it in, and the final format for import is a spreadsheet, much better than the CSV file on there. And as I mentioned before, you really, it's kind of back to this house analogy on there. You're not going to have the whole house and live in it before you start, but attempt to see where particular data elements will be in the software screens and where they'll be in the output and then the reporting. So that's a big thing. Typically, what people will do is they may ask their vendor to stage that for them, and be kind to the vendor on this, because keep in mind, it's like before, you can't build the whole house right off the bat, but have them at least show you what that plan's going to be. Show me how it'll look, at least like portions of that from a single plan. Maybe not an entire plan on there, or an entire plan, I guess it depends on how long it is. But show me, okay, I have my RTOs, I have my business processes, I have my interdependencies. How is that going to look? Show me samples of that in there. Show me how a report would look when it comes on out in there. And that shouldn't be terribly difficult to do, to have them stage that for you. So once again, you may be looking at this prior, obviously, to moving to a new solution. You're probably not looking at this right now. But obviously, as you start to do this, you're going to want to check it out too and validate it, which is actually moving into after the preparation on here, and actually after you've done the execution. So we'll talk about that too. Okay, so now, remember I mentioned before, look out for the formal sign-off on the proposal. So we got to do a couple of things. Either the vendor or you need to do this. Typically, you would probably want the vendor to at least show you where everything is going to wind up. They could probably do it a lot quicker. So a formal sign-off on the proposal occurs at this point, and that's when you're going through, and maybe even before this, you want to have together a migration project plan. You want to know what are the different tasks that you or the vendor are going to do, who's required to do this, and what's the respective time commitments and durations. One other big thing too, I didn't mention this on the cost proposal, is sometimes people will have a separate test site. So as opposed to having a live instance of the software, you may want to stage it first and then do it in that other software. So that may be there's typically a cost associated with that, but you need to ask. Maybe there's not with the particular vendor that you're looking at. And the big thing is you want to have a test script. So what is it that you're migrating? How are you going to make sure that it made it over the right way, that validation method script? What should this look like? And then a sign-off on there. A lot of people skip this. It's like, and it's kind of surprising on there. What is it? What am I looking for? What is it supposed to look like in there? And signing off on that. So it's a big thing to be able to have that, just to track that along the way. So typically what you'll see is that if you're doing the migration, you would sign off on all the different parts if the vendor does it for you. You may have a vendor sign off and then your sign off on there. We're done. You can go in and look at it. One big thing on there, too, is you want to make sure, and this is actually in the next slide on there, when you're actually starting to do the migration, execution, and validation on there, is the data going to appear right in there after you do it, or is it going to be overnight? How is that going to look? A lot of people, it'll be instantaneous, but sometimes it takes a little while to get that in there. So you want to look at, when you're doing the execution, I'm sorry I went a little out of order here, but this is really important to know because you may be going into the tool and it may not be done yet. So you want to make sure that everything is fully cooked before you're looking at the validation script on there. So first thing that you do when you're executing is, obviously, as we mentioned before, the configuration setup activities. If you've done customizations or there's something that you or the vendor need to do, if you need to set up security in the system. We don't need to do that but in our software, but maybe other people do to be able to set up everything. Maybe certain tables need to be set up. Maybe certain structures need to be set up. Maybe certain screens need to be set up on there. Make sure, as I mentioned before, make sure you know how much that is, how long that's going to take, and what that's going to cost you on there. So that's the first thing that's done. When you're going in, start the migration. And obviously, as I mentioned before, you want to see, are we going to do it plan by plan? Or are we going to do it data grouping by grouping? How is that going to look in there? Go into utilize your test script on here, sign off on there, and when everything has been done, set the go live date for the application. Give yourself a little bit of time because you may find things a little bit later. 1 week is probably a little aggressive. I would do that at I would say a minimum of 1 week for go live after you're done with that migration on there, just to make absolutely positively sure that you're ready. Okay. And we're going to have a good amount of time for questions here right after this. Some final tips for you. The big thing is, I think you know this, if you haven't left the webinar yet, there's no magic migration tool. It obviously requires careful planning and knowing what you're getting into before you're doing that. Be reasonable with expectations with, as I mentioned before, the moving into a new house analogy. Big thing on here, get all the migration costs up front, firm and in writing on here. This is a big thing in the industry right now that we see on here. If somebody says to you, well, we're coming out with a new product or a new version, and it's going to require you to migrate, well, how much is that going to be? Yeah, we're really not sure about that. That is a huge red flag. They should know that when they're making preparations to put in a new tool, and they have all their customers going into that tool, or they're going into a new version. You need to completely and absolutely understand what's going to be required from a client perspective, from a cost perspective, and from a time perspective in doing that. Hopefully it's nothing. Hopefully you just get the you can just easily upgrade, but as we've seen before, that's typically not the case. If they can't give that to you, I would probably start looking elsewhere on there, or the new solution you're looking at, if they can't give it to you, what that is, without a wide range on there, it's probably not that. It's just a huge unknown, and you probably shouldn't do that. And obviously, a big thing to note on here is that change often requires, you're going to have some inconvenience in the short term. Always does that, just like with the phone analogy. I'm going to have to go on in here, and I'm going to have to figure out my new phone. But the long-term benefits of that should really outweigh that short-term inconvenience. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace it and improve your program, and hopefully some of the tips that I gave you today we'll be able to help you do that. So that's one thing I want to leave you with on there. And just some resources for you here. So if you want to cover your ears, here's a little the one bullet point that's the salesy part of this of the webinar on there. Strategic BCP, my company, and our tool Resilience One, we're actually doing free migration right now. So that's an offer that we've started. And if you want to find out more about that or request a demo of the software, you can go to our website for more information on that. If you have any questions for me or any type of comments, you can send those to me too on there. And also too, I'm going to go back to the questions on there. If what we're also going to be doing too, we're going to be out at the Fall World Conference at Bob's conference next week on from Sunday through Wednesday. So and we're going to be doing another presentation on BCM standards. So if you'd like to come out and see me or anybody else there, we'll be there to answer any type of questions for you or provide any type of resources that you might require, migration or otherwise.
Most certainly. Thanks again, Frank. If anyone does have any questions for Frank, again, remember you can utilize the question panel found on the right hand of your side of your screen there. So I did forward a few of them over there, Frank, if you want to read through them. And also,
sure.
thanks for the plug as well for the fall show. We're certainly looking forward to it.
Okay. I want to keep, Bob, I want to keep everybody's identity on here confidential. Is there a way to switch on the GoToWebinar to where I just show the PowerPoint?
I am trying to, you have
to. Oh, here we go.
Up there on the right.
I think I've got it right now. Yep. Hold on one sec.
We won't see your control panel. That's never viewable by the audience, so you should be safe there.
Oh, okay.
I see none of your control panel.
Okay. All right. Oh, my question panel is, of course, about, hold on one second here. This is going to take a second. My question panel is about 1 inch high here, so let me just close out some things. Hopefully I can extend this. There we go. Okay. All right. Nobody can see this, right?
Correct. No one can see it.
Okay, good. All right. Just wanted to make sure. Okay. Okay. All right, good. Okay. All right, so here was a comment on here. Why are you switching? So we had a bunch of people post things up on here. We want the ability to track total enterprise risk. Our tool does not offer this. That's a good one, yeah, and that really goes into, as we mentioned before, functionality. It's a lot more than plans now. It's ability to go in and to really look at the overall risk of an organization, to be able to do more metrics around maybe a BIA or a risk assessment or things like that, and obviously to be able to report on that. So that's a real good comment. That's another real popular one on there. Okay, let me see. Let me just read these before I read them off here. Okay, here we go. Not migrating, no current system, managing plans in MS Office products, no ability to schedule plan reviews automatically, right? There's no calendaring tool in Microsoft Office on there, I guess, unless you count, I guess, Outlook, which really isn't integrated in with Word or Excel templates. No ability to mine the data. So once again, the analysis, that middle part is really lacking. No ability to grow the program without some additional automation, and that's really obviously that's very important. When I first started doing business continuity planning a long time ago, one of the big things was that you hit a ceiling of actually working within those templates or within a document-based system, because there's no ability to synthesize, to mine the data, and it makes it very difficult to report. So that's another real good reason. Here's another one, using Excel to build plans, wanting to migrate to something else so that we can automate the workflow process. So there's workflow, again, reminders for updates, etc. Also, it is difficult to extrapolate data for reporting since they are in individual workbooks. Yeah, that's a big thing. I used to, just as a precursor to Resilience One, I actually used to do things in Excel spreadsheets, and I'm pretty good in Excel. But I got to say, I mean, just it was awfully painful trying to synthesize data and report on it. It just took forever on there. So you're going to reach once again, you're going to reach a ceiling on there. So that's a really good note on there. Here's another one. Age system no longer adequately supports changes in business, especially viewing areas of risk exposure. So yeah, a lot of times people want to go into different areas of the business. You know, I want to slice and dice by facility, location, mega business process is a big thing. And in any type of, I wouldn't even say large organizations, in complex environments or just even in some normal business environments, you just want to be able to slice and dice in different ways. You know, facilities and people matter to crisis management. Business process matters to business, your business areas. Risk manage, you know, is almost everybody now within the organization. Financial for the CFO. There's so many different constituencies that you want to be able to please on there. System lacks reporting, rigorous report writing capability. Data in system cannot be easily retrieved and formatted to meet user needs. So there's a couple of more on there. So those are some of the reasons why people are thinking about migrating, or I guess have migrated right now. And we have a couple of questions too. How long would you expect a migration from one system to another to take? All right, so if we're assuming here, you know, one system being one commercial system to another one to take, that really depends on a couple of things on here. Now, I mean, obviously, if it's going to take you too much time, and what exactly is too much time, I guess that's really up to you to decide what that is. You know, you really wouldn't want to do that. I mean, for me, and this is just my opinion on here, I think if it takes anything longer than like a month and a half or 2 months to get everything over, I don't think that that's an efficient migration. I would cap it at that on there. You want to look for experience in doing the migration. You want to look for, you know, has the vendor actually done that before? You don't necessarily have to have migrated from that particular system to your, you know, to the system that you're going to. It does help though, because you'll have better familiarity with the tables within that system if you can access them. And going from relational table to relational table, as we mentioned earlier in that native format, is a lot easier to do on there. I can tell you that with us, we generally tend to target a month. I've seen it be as long as like, you figure, 6 months or a year or something like that. When you're migrating, one of the biggest considerations is, you can't continuously put data into the data set that's being migrated over. You'll never finish on there. So you're going to have a cutoff point for when you're putting that data in. So in the time period that it takes to go from the end time of assembling that data and where you're starting to migrate that, and the time it takes to migrate, you're kind of at a standstill with your program there, unless you're figuring there's and a lot of times there's decent ways for getting the rest in, but generally you want to start off fresh. This is where our starting point is, this system, not, hey, I have to keep on going afterwards. So I would say anything over like a month and a half, I would probably keep it to that. Here's another question on here. Is the data mapping the business's responsibility or the vendor's? Advantages and disadvantages of both. So, well, here's the thing. It's I guess it depends on the vendor on here. Oh, actually, you know what? Hold on. There's a follow-on question here too. For example, identifying current data points to the new fields in the system, is that the business responsibility or the vendor's on there? I guess it depends on the vendor that you talk to on there. A big thing on there, that data, that's the data analysis part. So are they going to charge you for scoping this on here? Which is essentially what's going on, because you can't get a proposal until you know how big it's going to be on there. Well, because we do it for free, obviously that's really not, you would want us to do that. It's really not a consideration. And even before we started doing that, one of the things that we always said was, you really want us to do that. We know the data the best. how would it go into your system? So if you have sample plans or something, what we'll typically do is we'll notate those plans or BIA spreadsheets or the Word documents. We'll go in there and we'll say, this goes into this screen in Resilience 1. This goes into this screen. This goes into this. Here's the field name. This is how it goes in. And we'll write API or import or manual data input on there. Ideally, you'd want it on your vendor. The drawback on that is if they charge you money to do that, then the drawback is you're going to have to pay money for it, whereas if you did it for yourself, it would be free. And obviously the drawback in you doing it yourself is that you're not going to understand it as well as the vendor would, and it would take time to do that. So that's a huge consideration on there, and really that could be some considerable work on there, understanding who's going to do it, how much time is it going to take, what's the cost going to be in doing that if the vendor does that. But and if you've attended any of my other webinars, I've always said before, I put it on the vendor. Let the vendor do that, and make sure that they don't charge you for that. That should be a part of that service if they want. Honestly, if they want you in the new software, then they should probably be doing that for you.
All right,
Okay.
that looks like the final question there. Any parting words here today, Frank?
No, I wanted to thank everybody for their time today and look at migration, and hope to see everybody out at the conference, and looking forward to reconnecting or meeting some new people too. So thanks again for everybody's time today. I really appreciate you taking an hour out of your afternoon.
All right, thanks a bunch. Thanks again, everyone, for their attendance here today. We again hope you found some great information from today's presentation. DRJ would also like to thank Frank for his time here today, as well as Strategic BCP for sponsoring today's webinar. We'll be emailing everyone a link to the recording of this webinar. You may view it as frequently as you wish or share it with your peers. If you do have any additional questions, please contact Disaster Recovery Journal. Thank you again, and this now ends today's webinar.